It's nice to meet another William, I guess.
I know. What a great name.
Yeah, I've been a big fan for a long time, obviously, one of our great editors working. I know you've worked with Ben frequently. You won an Oscar editing Argo even. As I understand it, this was a pretty quick turnaround time when you got thrown into this one. So tell me a little bit about that process.
Well, it was. I mean, I didn't even know about the film. I think he didn't even know about the film. It felt like it was 6 weeks. I can't remember exactly, but it was short. I have this movie we're going to do. I was like, they told me the story. I thought it was amazing. I didn't, I said, well, how about, can I read the script? So we're still working on it. He sent me what the original one, but then he said, before I even read it, he said, wait, I'm sending you a new one tomorrow. And and then they were so deep into pre-production, and there was so much going on with casting and all that we didn't really talk much about the film, or really dig deep into it until we started shooting and cutting. And we the shoot was 23 days. And they had, it was like all these people that were so good at their jobs, including the actors and I mean everybody top to bottom, that it just moved fast. And Bob Richardson, who's the DP, is a genius and fast on top of it. And he and Ben have a real rapport because they did the Live by Night together. And it just it just really moved. And what was also helpful was that we were all in the same building: the production office, the editing rooms, and the set. Almost all the sets were in this building in Santa Monica, in the Santa Monica Industrial Park. And so it was very immediate. If I needed Ben, I could just walk out the door and there he was, 20 feet away in the hallway. Or, they had all the 2 floors of Nike were fully built out. They stripped them down and fully built them. So all that was, like it was really upstairs, downstairs, like it was a real place. And
That's fun.
yeah, and then even the lunchroom, and it was all, and then also, but they had like Viola Davis's kitchen. The Jordan's kitchen was in another office, and what's his name, David Falk, Chris Messina's, that was in another.
Yeah.
It was all there, so it was like making a really high-end film in a college dormitory in a way. They refer to it as summer camp, but
that sounds so fun, honestly.
It was really fun. I mean, it was hard work, and everybody was hustling and working as hard as they could. And Ben's very inspiring as a director. He's very upbeat and like really knows what he's doing, and everybody feeds off that energy. And I was getting a ton of footage, because to shoot that fast, you got to shoot a lot of film and a lot of cameras, and a lot of times they were shooting 5 cameras and or 4, but especially all the phone call scenes, they shot with 5 cameras. And so it's a tremendous amount of film, and I was working my tail off to stay up to camera so that they could, because they were shooting so fast, so that just so Ben, they could be sure he wasn't missing anything, because, and then it turned out a few times, and it was more like, oh, that transition is weird. We need to know this before we get to there, or whatever it was. And the 3 of us would sit around and come up with ideas, and they'd think it's something brilliant usually, and they go literally a couple of times like, hey, okay, we'll be right back, and they would literally run out down the hall and shoot it. The whole set was lit all the time, and Bob just had to tweak, do the fine touches on the lighting. And when they would shoot stuff, like it wasn't right then, it would be the next morning, and so it was constantly moving and shooting, and it was so much fun. It was like how you'd picture it to be,
Yeah, it sounds almost like going back to the old days of the studio system, where everything's on
right
the
yeah,
lot.
right.
That's fun.
And they treated us great. They had, every day would be like a different food truck, or an ice cream truck, or an Italian ice truck, and it was, so they treated us great. The food was great. Everybody, it was a one giant family. Everybody got along. It was just really, really fun.
Well, you mentioned 5 cameras for a lot of these scenes, and that kind of ties into something I was curious about, which is it's not easy to make a movie like this that is largely set in just a couple rooms and is primarily conversations and keep it from just becoming essentially a talking head piece. So, tell me a little bit about kind of, and obviously some of this was with Ben and Bob's work in camera, but tell me a little bit about keeping everything kind of energetic and visually dynamic, making sure things don't get repetitive when you're in these same locations so frequently.
Well, like you say, I mean, a lot of the credit, a lot of moving camera, a lot of steady cam, and there's something 360 cameras, and then, which really helped and added a lot of energy and a lot of movement to it. And but luckily for me, I had a lot of coverage, and they most of the time they were moving those cameras or leaving it to slowly, subtly moving them, and I had a lot of different angles, so it allowed me to not overcut it, but to cut it in a way that, and it always had a lot of energy. And the actors, obviously, Viola Davis, Matt Damon, Jason Bateman, it's like it's a little cheating to have that kind of skill, so because the actors brought so much of their own energy to it. Whether like Chris Messina, obviously his character is, so much fun, and Chris just had so much fun with the part that gave it, his performance gave it the energy. So it was always about like keeping one step, to keeping the tension of the story going. Like, are they going to do it? Are they not? Is they going to, are they going to get Jordan? So you have to find that suspension of disbelief, and cut it at a pace that feels like almost like a ticking clock, so that there's always something happening and always something moving forward, and just pausing when we need to pause for emotional beats, but keeping the story moving like it was a race against the other sneaker companies, and wanted to keep that energy of that. So it was just something we were always aware of, from scene to scene, within scenes, to keep the pace up, except when necessary, when there's like I said, when an emotional beat. I mean, our job is to sort of, as an editor, your job is to tell the story in the most efficient way. And so hopefully we did that with this movie, and it feels like we did, because the feedback,
Well, there's one emotional beat in particular that you really get to shine in, obviously, and I assume you know what I'm going to say, which is Matt Damon's big speech,
Yeah.
where, you're interspersing all this footage of Michael's career and life. You're choosing the right moments to cut back to Matt. So tell me a little bit about that sequence, because that is probably the moment that really sealed the deal in this moment for people, in this movie for people.
Yeah, I agree. And it was, I knew from the first time I read the script that was going to be the most challenging scene editorially, because of all the, like what you're talking about. I mean, just the weight of the scene, just as a scene, the audience has to believe that the Jordans were convinced, or believe they're convinced enough, and believe that it's going wrong. But the hardest thing obviously was, if you're flashing forward in time, and that's an unusual thing to do in a movie, and it's certainly an unusual thing to do in a movie that feels like gritty and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of, will it work at all, and was a question. And originally as scripted, originally as script, can you hear that?
No, I can't.
There's like loud horns. Originally as scripted, it was when Matt started pitching Michael, it was supposed to be much more of Matt's dialogue as almost like a voiceover over a series of video images, meaning that we weren't going to be on him very much. It was going to be not all video, but a lot. And it worked, but it felt a little outside the movie, and it felt a little strangely unemotional. And Matt was so good in his performance that we were like, why aren't we on Matt more? So like, let's lean. I think because in that scene, the audience is Michael Jordan. You're standing there. You don't see his face. You're getting the pitch, and Matt was so good, and so his energy was so good, that we just like, we got to stay on Matt a lot. And then that led us to realize that these images need to be snapshots and not full, telling the story with this video. And they need to be snapshots of the future, because that's what it's just like you're glimpsing, and we wanted the images to be glimpsed. and that really is when it clicked in. We realized they need to be short pieces, and what was more important was how is Dolores Jordan reacting to this? How's Phil Knight, you know, reacting to it? How's James Jordan reacting to it? And then because through that you got how Michael was feeling, because you know Dolores is obviously the matriarch of that family, and as Michael put it, she ran shit. I mean that when they in the scene with George Raveling where George says about the mom run shit, that's right out of Michael's mouth. Michael said that to Ben. He said, my dad was this great guy, great personality, but my mom run shit. So that went right in the screenplay. So that scene was a work in progress almost up until the very end, and just to get the right balance. And again, you're an unlimited supply of Michael Jordan highlights. Which ones do we use? And we didn't want it to become a Michael Jordan highlight reel. You can go on YouTube. That they needed to tell a specific emotional story, and when we distilled it all down to that, then the scene worked. It really worked emotionally.
So there's there's two other things as we kind of get close to the end here I was curious about. One, the needle drops in this film. How involved were you in picking out those songs? It's a great soundtrack.
I was involved in that. Ben, I was a little older than Ben, but we both grew up with all those songs, so I loved every song he picked. He had a huge library of songs. There were some that were written into the script, but then as we got closer to shooting, Ben called me and said, I think I want to have a lot of songs in the movie. I think the movie will really lend itself to that. And I thought it was a great idea. And so he had a whole library of songs, not necessarily for any specific. There were some, like I said, that were scripted, were for specific spots, like, My Adidas clearly went in that place,
Right.
And there was other songs that were written in that's where it goes. But most of them weren't. So it was a lot of experimenting, me experimenting, Ben saying, no, let's try this, let's try that. He had a very, very heavy hand into what went in with the final. I mean, he's the director, and he had we would argue like in a friendly way. We would always be fighting. Like, I can't believe you like that song, because we should use this. It was a lot of like, me trying to get my favorites in, him trying to get his favorites in, but ultimately it was a real collaboration. But he had a real vision for what those songs should be. So he ended up being the arbiter of the song score.
All right, and then the last question is, and this ties into a song. Tell me really quickly about putting together those opening credits. I think "Money for Nothing's" playing, and it's this great snapshot of the '80s.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be. Set the time period, and you said it more in a pop culture way, as more than a political way. Because this movie is about, it's obviously about a mother and her son, and about somebody like sticking to their convictions and the underdog succeeding, but the sort of framework of it is this, glimpse of the '80s. So it was, and because the sneaker became such a big thing in pop culture, that the opening montage lent itself to that, with commercials and movie clips and cell phones, and who was running for president, and so it just, we had, of course, the choice of everything that's ever been on video in the '80s or in '84. So it was a little bit overwhelming, but then as we got to, again, distilling it down to what this was trying to do, what story we're trying to tell with it, it became clear what to use. And then the basketball scene in the opening and the Vegas scene, where they were meant to be originally in the body of the film. And when they shot it, in the middle of shooting it, Matt said to Ben, I don't think this is going to work here. I don't think we need it there. I think we should use it in the opening. And it was both Ben and I were like, yes, of course, you're right. And we were able to weave it in together to set Sonny up and what his character was like and what he did. So that when you talk about him being a basketball guru, you see it. You've already seen it. You talk about it being a gambler, you've seen it. So
That's wild because that felt so natural there in the opening. I assumed it was always scripted like that.
No, we were able to weave it together that it worked, and it just made the opening. It wasn't so. It just wasn't like an opening credit thing. It actually had story, so that it made it, way better by having that in there. And it's and then Ben and a couple of the camera people and some of the extras. They gave everybody cameras in the bullpen area of Nike on the set. And so a lot of that stuff, like 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter stuff, the people on set just had cameras and were shooting stuff, and Ben was shooting stuff. Like between takes, he would grab an 8 millimeter camera and start shooting a ton of stuff, whether shooting the inserts, shooting the actors, shooting the extras, and so we had hours and hours of our own like sort of fake archival that we were able to blend. We were able to blend with the real archival, and hopefully it came off quite seamlessly.
Yeah, it's a throwback to your days of JFK with Oliver Stone, right? Yeah, all that fake archival with the real deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we're about out of time.
Well, yeah, but anyway, pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.